The air was still, the only sounds the rustling of leaves in the wind and the occasional chirp of distant birds. High on a rocky plateau in the heart of the Great Smoky Mountains, 3 pairs of hiking boots stood in a perfect line, side by side, large, medium, and small, each pair showing signs of weathering, their laces frayed, and the leather cracked with age. But there was something profoundly unsettling about the scene. No one was around. No one had been there for years. The boots, arranged so meticulously, seemed to be waiting for someone, or perhaps something. A chilling question lingered in the air. Who had placed them there? And why? In a place so remote, so untouched, the mystery of these abandoned shoes beckoned, pulling anyone who stumbled upon them into a world of unanswered questions. What happened to the family who had once worn them? And what secrets does this forest still hide? It was a perfect autumn day in the Great Smoky Mountains, the air crisp and cool, with a faint breeze rustling through the golden leaves. The Henderson family, Michael, Sarah, and their 10-year-old son Leo, had been planning this weekend getaway for weeks. For Michael, a seasoned engineer, every trip was meticulously prepared. He had studied the maps of the park, checked the weather forecast several times, and ensured the family had all the necessary equipment. Sarah, a school teacher by profession, had always shared her husband's enthusiasm for the outdoors, but she was the voice of reason, always a little more cautious. She ensured they packed enough food, water, and layers of clothing to stay warm as they ventured into the wilderness. For Leo, their adventurous son, this was an exciting opportunity to explore the forest, to find animal tracks, and collect rocks. The plan was simple. They would hike one of the park's popular trails, enjoy the breathtaking views, have a small picnic, and return to their car by the evening. It was a familiar routine, one that they had done many times before. They even agreed with Sarah's sister, Jessica, that they would call her by 7 p.m. to let her know they were okay. This precaution was always in place, just a quick call to ensure everything was fine. But there would be no call that evening. The Hendersons left their car in the parking lot at the foot of Klingman's Dome, the highest point in the park. The sight of them leaving, so casual and happy, seemed to reflect the normalcy of their day ahead. Michael adjusted Leo's backpack one last time, making sure the straps were secure, while Sarah took a few photos of the scene, capturing the moment before they set off. It was a typical family outing, nothing out of the ordinary. They waved goodbye to another couple of tourists, their laughter and chatter fading as they disappeared down the trail into the forest. As they walked deeper into the woods, there was nothing to suggest that anything would go wrong. The trail was well-traveled, a path many hikers had walked before them. Yet, as the hours ticked by, something started to feel amiss. Jessica, Sarah's sister, waited by her phone that evening, waiting for the familiar call. It was just a quick check-in, nothing more, but it didn't come. 7 o'clock passed, then 8. Jessica's unease grew as the minutes turned into hours. This wasn't like Michael. He was always punctual, always reliable. If he said he'd call by 7, he would. But as the night wore on and there was still no sign of them, the worry set in. She began to call their phones, but both of them went straight to voicemail. Panic set in when 9 o'clock arrived, and by 10, Jessica knew something was terribly wrong. She immediately contacted the National Park Rescue Service, reporting the missing family. The rangers took the call seriously, recognizing the urgency in Jessica's voice. They asked about the route the family had planned, what they had been wearing, and the specifics of their gear. Less than an hour later, the first group of rescuers set off from the parking lot. Their car, a gray SUV, was still parked where it had been left, cold and untouched. That was the first red flag: their car, untouched by any signs of a hasty departure. The search began that evening, but the dense forest and rugged terrain made it nearly impossible to conduct a search in the dark. As the hours passed, the group decided to wait until dawn to continue the operation. By morning, the park had mobilized a full search operation. Dozens of volunteers and professional rescuers joined the park rangers. They carefully examined the route the Hendersons were supposed to have taken, combing through the area. But there was no sign of them, no footprints, no discarded gear, no broken branches. Nothing that could indicate that the family had ever been there. The search grew more frantic, but still, the trail remained silent. Days passed, and with each passing hour, hope started to wane. The weather in the mountains turned harsher, and rain began to fall, further complicating the search. Helicopters were dispatched, and teams scoured every inch of the park, but the family's disappearance seemed like an unsolvable mystery. The dense trees and thick underbrush made it almost impossible to see anything from the air. Rescuers on the ground expanded their search into even more remote areas, moving away from the official trails and venturing deep into ravines and brush. They were joined by dog teams trained to search for missing persons, but even the dogs began to act strangely. The dogs would pick up the scent of the Hendersons' car, only for it to fade away mysteriously after a few hundred meters. They would circle back and then lose interest. It was as if the family had vanished into thin air. By the end of the first week, there was still no sign of them, no evidence to explain their sudden disappearance. The search had become a desperate attempt to find even the smallest clue, but everything seemed to point to a single eerie conclusion. The family had simply vanished. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of animal attacks, or even a trace of their belongings. Experienced hikers like Michael would have known to make a fire if they had gotten lost or were caught in the wild overnight. But there was no sign of any fire, no burnt wood, no embers, not even the faintest trace of smoke. It was as if they had just disappeared, leaving nothing behind but the trees and the silence of the mountain. The investigation led to many theories. Maybe they had wandered off the trail. Perhaps Michael had been injured and they died of exposure or hypothermia. Yet, the complete absence of any evidence made this theory seem increasingly far-fetched. No one could explain the lack of even the most basic signs of survival, no broken branches, no footprints leading off the path, no indication that the family had even tried to make shelter. Their disappearance remained as baffling as it was terrifying. As the days turned into weeks, the search began to slow down. The official investigation was eventually suspended after 2 weeks, with no further leads. The Hendersons had vanished, and the only trace left behind was the memory of them 3 people who had set out on a routine hike and simply never returned. Despite the best efforts of the rescue teams, no one had any answers, and the mystery of what happened to them remained unsolved. And yet, in the heart of the forest, something was waiting. Something that had been there all along, hidden from the world, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The mystery of the Henderson family was far from over. As the search continued, the tension in the air grew heavier. Days turned into nights, and still, no trace of the Henderson family had been found. The search teams, made up of park rangers, volunteers, and even specialized rescue dogs, combed every inch of the Great Smoky Mountains, but they found nothing. No footprints, no sign of struggle, no stray belongings left behind. It was as if the family had simply vanished into thin air. The rangers were baffled. They had followed the trail, checked every corner of the dense forest, and even sent helicopters to search from the skies. But as each day passed, the likelihood of finding them alive began to fade. The search grew more desperate, yet the forest remained eerily silent, as though it had swallowed the family whole. The lack of evidence only added to the growing unease. For experienced hikers like Michael, to simply disappear without a trace was almost impossible. A seasoned traveler would have left some sort of clue, a sign, a broken branch, or a discarded item, something to show they had been there. But there was nothing, just an empty trail. The mystery deepened, the silence becoming almost unbearable. As days turned into weeks, the authorities began to consider all the possibilities. Some speculated that the family might have been attacked by a bear. It wasn't entirely out of the question, given the park's history of wildlife encounters, but experts quickly dismissed this theory. A bear attack, especially on 3 people, would have left clear signs: torn clothing, blood stains, perhaps even remains. But nothing like that had been found. No fur, no claw marks, nothing. The forest was silent, and there was no trace of the family's presence. The investigators could not understand why, if they had been attacked, there were no signs of a struggle, no signs of danger. Another theory that emerged was that they had become lost. It was entirely possible that, in the vast expanse of the Smoky Mountains, they had strayed off the beaten path, become disoriented, and perished from hunger or hypothermia. But this theory also failed to explain the complete absence of evidence. If they had gotten lost, why wasn't there a fire? Why wasn't there a shelter? Michael would have known better than to wander in the woods without trying to make a fire or find some kind of safe haven. The lack of such basic survival instincts seemed out of character. There was no indication that they had even tried to find shelter or warmth, which made this theory harder to believe. As the search continued and hope began to wane, the questions only multiplied. What had happened to the Hendersons? Where had they gone? And why was there nothing left behind to indicate their passing? It was as if the mountains themselves were keeping their secrets, hiding the truth from the investigators. The authorities, now grasping at straws, began to turn to more unusual theories. Perhaps they had stumbled upon something dangerous, something in the wilderness that no one was meant to find. Some speculated that they had encountered an illicit drug operation, a hidden camp, or a secretive group operating in the area. It was not unheard of for such things to exist in the vast remote forests of the Smokies. But again, there was no evidence to support this theory either. No sign of any illegal activity, no trail leading to a hidden compound, nothing. The mystery grew more unsettling with every passing hour. With each failed search attempt, the investigators found themselves further from answers and deeper into confusion. The lack of any trace, the absence of clues, only deepened the fear that something more sinister had taken place. But still, they couldn't explain what that something might be. And then, as if taunting the investigation, a new and chilling possibility emerged. Who had placed the shoes on the plateau, and why? It was a question that gnawed at the back of every investigator's mind. The shoes had been placed there deliberately, lined up so neatly, so carefully. A child's shoe, a pair for an adult, and one for a larger person, arranged in perfect order. The image was haunting, a scene frozen in time that raised even more questions. How could a family, so well prepared for their hike, suddenly vanish without a trace? Why would someone bring their shoes here years after their disappearance? And who would do such a thing? These questions lingered, unanswered, feeding the growing sense of unease. As the search wound down and the authorities prepared to suspend the official investigation, the mystery of the Henderson family's disappearance had yet to be solved. Theories abounded, but none were conclusive. The family had disappeared without a single clue to explain their absence, leaving behind nothing but silence and uncertainty. It was as though the forest had swallowed them whole, and with it, their secrets. The search may have officially ended, but the story didn't. The mystery of the Hendersons' disappearance would remain unsolved, and as the years passed, the questions would only grow. Who had placed the shoes on that remote plateau, and why? What had happened to the Henderson family? Had they been the victims of a tragic accident, or was there something more sinister at play? The unanswered questions would linger in the minds of those who had followed the case, a haunting reminder of how the mountains kept their secrets, hiding the truth from the world. 6 years had passed since the Henderson family vanished without a trace. The search had long since been called off, the forest swallowing the family's secrets whole, and their story had gradually faded into local legend. The mystery was as cold as the mountain air, with no answers, no resolution, just a haunting emptiness left in their wake. But then, in a twist no one saw coming, the unthinkable happened. A young geology student, Ben Carter, was exploring a remote part of the park, far off the regular tourist trails. Ben had always preferred the less trodden paths, driven by a fascination with the rugged beauty of the mountains and the rare minerals they concealed. It was on one of these secluded hikes that he stumbled upon something that would bring the case of the Henderson family back into the public eye. After hours of trudging through dense undergrowth, Ben reached a small rocky plateau, a place untouched by the usual park visitors. It was a quiet, isolated spot with only the sound of his own breath and the wind in the trees. As he paused to rest, something caught his eye. 3 dark objects standing out against the gray stone. At first glance they appeared to be rocks, but something about their arrangement seemed off. The objects were too regular, too orderly to be natural. His curiosity piqued. Ben approached, each step heavy with an unease he couldn't explain. As he got closer, his eyes widened in disbelief. They were not rocks. They were boots, 3 pairs of hiking boots, placed with eerie precision in a straight line. The first pair was large, clearly meant for an adult male, the second a woman's pair, and the third a small child's boots. They stood there, weathered by time, the leather cracked and faded by years of exposure to the elements. The laces had rotted away, and the soles had become brittle. But the most unsettling thing wasn't their worn appearance. It was the unnatural way they were arranged, as if someone had deliberately placed them there, as if the boots were waiting for something or someone. Ben circled the boots, inspecting them closely. There was no sign of any other belongings. No backpacks, no discarded jackets or other personal items, just these 3 pairs of boots. The stillness of the scene sent a chill through him. Why were they here? Who had placed them so carefully, in such a precise order? He felt a growing sense of dread, the kind that creeps up on you when you know you've found something far more disturbing than you anticipated. In his hesitation, Ben reached down to pick up the child's boot. It was light, much lighter than he expected. As he turned it over, a small, irregularly shaped object fell out onto the rock. The sight of it made his blood run cold. It was a bone-smooth, small, and unmistakably human. Ben recoiled, his stomach twisting in horror. The bone had a worn, smooth texture, its edges round from years of decay. It was unmistakably a child's foot bone, and in that moment, the weight of what he had just discovered hit him like a wave. His mind raced. Was it a clue? Was this connected to the Henderson family? The shoes matched the descriptions of those worn by Michael, Sarah, and Leo when they disappeared. But how? Why would this bone be here, in a child's boot, so far from where the family had last been seen? The question loomed in Ben's mind, gnawing at him. Who had left this behind, and why? He immediately dropped the bone and the boot back where he found them, retreating quickly from the scene, his heart pounding in his chest. He ran back to the ranger station, nearly tripping over his own feet in his haste to tell someone, anyone, what he had discovered. The adrenaline surged through him, but with it came a deep sense of unease. His discovery had turned the case upside down, but it also left him with even more questions than answers. When Ben reached the ranger station, out of breath and shaking, he showed the photos on his phone. At first, the rangers were skeptical. They had seen too many false leads over the years, but when they examined the images, their faces turned pale. They could no longer dismiss what Ben had found. A full investigation team was quickly assembled and dispatched to the plateau where the shoes had been discovered. They found the boots exactly as Ben had described, arranged with unsettling precision, but there was more. Upon closer inspection, microscopic traces of dried blood were found on the insoles of the boots. The blood had been there for years, at least 4 years, long after the family had disappeared. The bone in the child's boot was sent for examination, and the results confirmed the investigators' worst fears. It belonged to Leo Henderson. The small heel bone perfectly matched the child's age at the time of the disappearance, and the forensic anthropologist could find no signs of injury that could have led to his death. It appeared that the bone had simply decomposed, severed from the rest of the body over the years. But that still didn't explain where the rest of the child's remains were, or where Michael and Sarah's bodies were. The entire family had vanished, leaving behind nothing but these haunting, incomplete pieces. The unsettling arrangement of the boots and the presence of the bone raised even more questions. Who had placed them there, so carefully, so deliberately? What was the meaning behind this grim memorial? It was clear that someone had found the family's bodies, but why take the time to return to this remote spot years later to set up this eerie display? Was it a twisted ritual, a final message, or was it something more sinister? The investigators could only speculate, their minds racing with possibilities, but there was no solid evidence to confirm any theory. The discovery sent shockwaves through the case. For 6 years, the mystery had seemed unsolvable, but now, with the bone and the blood, the investigators had new clues to work with. The search for the truth was far from over. But as the mystery deepened, one thing became abundantly clear. Someone knew exactly what had happened to the Henderson family. And they were watching, waiting, perhaps even orchestrating the twists in this chilling tale. The truth was out there, but so were the secrets, hidden deep within the shadows of the Smoky Mountains. Despite the new evidence found at the remote plateau, the mystery of the Henderson family's disappearance remains unsolved. The name Silas Crow surfaced as a potential lead, a reclusive man who lived on the fringes of the park. His eccentric behavior and strange comments had caught the attention of authorities early on, but his death, a year before the discovery of the shoes and bone, meant he could never be questioned. A search of his home revealed even more unsettling details. Maps of the park, with hidden trails circled in red, binoculars aimed at popular hiking routes, and an unsettling collection of lost items. All these pieces pointed to a man who had been watching, perhaps even waiting, for something. Could Silas Crow have been involved in the family's disappearance, or was he just another shadow in the wilderness, offering no more than a passing glimpse into a far darker truth? No one will ever know for sure, and the case of the Henderson family remains an eerie enigma, one that refuses to be solved. As the investigation stands still, we're left with more questions than answers. What do you think really happened to the Hendersons? Was Silas Crow the key to this chilling mystery? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true crime stories that dive deep into the unknown.